I think we can all remember where we were at when we first saw this moment right here. I mean, for some of us more seasoned Marvel fans, we were just kind of thinking like, oh, cool, they're going to be doing the Infinity Saga next. And for other people, it might not have been that big of a reveal for them, but I mean, at least it was very much intriguing and it kind of got them interested because it was clear that Marvel actually had a plan where they're going with that. The first phase of the Avengers or for the MCU was literally just to kind of establish the team and things like that. I mean, build up each individual character, then go into their team movie, then kind of go from there. And now we have this huge cosmic threat, and that's what they're obviously building up to. Now imagine if that never actually happened, where instead of actually establishing that Thanos was the next big bad or something that kind of a looming threat or whatever, the first time we even hear reference to Thanos was literally in Infinity War. Like they were just kind of building up to something and we didn't know what, and that was what it was because the studio didn't know. They were just trying to put it together as they go. And that's kind of what we're getting a lot of now with the future MCU movies or the current phase of MCU movies, at least since post Endgame. So David Harbour, who was also in Black Widow, basically came out and said in a recent interview that, yeah, they were just kind of reworking it as they shoot the whole thing. And I know this isn't the MCU phase as a whole, but I mean, it's on a smaller scale. It's the same principle when it comes to an individual movie. Because when you establish, at least when you start a movie, you should have an idea where the movie's going. But a lot of the times that's not what they're doing. Now, in this interview, David Harbour says that he kind of likes the freedom of this, but he's talking about things like Thunderbolts where they don't have that kind of freedom because it's a little bit more rigid with it. But with Black Widow, they were just kind of rewriting it as they go and reworking it. And a lot of the times that's a result of the studio not knowing what they're doing and not knowing what will work. Instead, they want to basically leave themselves some options, put it in front of test screenings and see what they think and just kind of push out what performs the best. And that sounds like a good idea on paper. Unfortunately, the problem with that is a lot of the times test screenings aren't necessarily fans of the MCU or anything like that. It's literally just random people and a random assortment of people. So you might do something that plays well to them, but then actual fans in general, when the general audiences see it, they'll point out like, well, no, this kind of contradicts other stuff from previous movies, or it's not setting up these other things that are supposed to be happening and things like that. And as a result, people will say like, oh, well, that's nitpicking. It's like, is it really nitpicking when you expect fans to be a fan of something? I mean, that's all it is really, it's like, if you're contradicting your previous works, it's like, well, why are you making these new ones that contradict that? I mean, you're kind of like saying you need to watch the other Marvel movies in order to understand the new ones. But when you watch the new ones, you're supposed to ignore the old ones, which to me doesn't make sense. But that's kind of the avenue that they're playing at now. And the fact that they're changing it with Thunderbolts, the newer movie, kind of suggests that Marvel understands that this is an issue with them. And that's kind of why they're trying to change course with this. And we have seen this in firsthand in some of the movies, especially with or Black Widow here, because I mean, if you look at what happened with the end of the movie,
this was fun. No.
I mean, just see how awful that looks. Like, I mean, and I'm not blaming the CGI artists for this. I mean, I think that they do the best of what they could, and I mean, and they do things even in this movie itself that is fantastic. The problem is when you're changing stuff as you go, you leave them no room to actually, or no time to actually do the job that they need to do, because VFX work is time intensive. I mean, we've seen this in other movies like the final fight in Black Panther, for instance, how terrible that looked. And apparently that took like 2 weeks to actually make for them, which is an insane amount of time. I mean, by an insane small amount of time to actually do that. And that's the problem, because the studio doesn't know what they're doing. They don't have a plan from the get-go. So they're just trying to make it up as they go along and see what works. And this is contrary to what made Marvel movies actually good, because when you're trying to scramble to change things like that, you're basically following trends as opposed to actually setting trends. Because I mean, you look at the early phases of the DC movies, they're basically trying to be what Marvel is. But the thing is, what made Marvel who they are, at least the MCU wise goes, is that they were basically setting out to like do something that hasn't really been done before. It's like, we're going to create a cinematic universe. We're basically going to create these individual movies, and then we're going to have all these like crossover events and other things like that and build it up on top of each other like comic book series, which is fantastic and something that's never been done before. And now they're just kind of like scrambling to figure out like, okay, what are we going to do next? And as a result, you're getting weak stuff like this. I mean, not only that, it costs the studio much more money to try to actually scramble to reshoot things and redo a VFX and things like that. And as a result, we're seeing these movies just have ballooning budgets. I mean, with like 200 to 300 million dollars plus for some of these movies, which is not only insane just to think about, but just it means like every movie needs to gross like $1 billion to be successful. I mean, or close to it. I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, I mean, that has like over $800 million globally that it brought in. But even then, it had such a huge budget and marketing and everything like that, that it's almost barely considered a success, just kind of a mild success for Disney because they spent so much on it. And that's why we're also getting things like Bob Iger coming out at their quarterly earnings call and saying like, oh, we want to actually kind of roll back on what we're spending on these movies and things like that. And I think that's a smart move. And from what David Harbour was saying about Thunderbolts, it sounds like they're trying to do that. Like he says, the script is a lot more tighter on that. And they're trying to more stick closely to it. And that's probably a wise move moving forward, because from what we've seen, like it's obvious that Disney is having an issue with their movies and people are taking note of it. And as a result, people aren't going to see them in theaters and they're losing money. And it's either going to be the end of the MCU, which I don't see it happening anytime soon. But what I do see happening is they're going to basically kind of shrink them down. And I think that is a wise move and more or less kind of plan ahead and go from there, as opposed to just shooting from the hip. I mean, what's the saying goes, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail, something like that. I think that's what they're kind of learning from this. And hopefully they're going to change course and make better movies, because I am tired of seeing just the lot of crap that's coming out. And I want to go back to like the good days, like the early days of the MCU when you were excited about seeing them in theaters and you couldn't wait for the new one to come out instead of what we're seeing now. But let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. And if you like the video, make sure you click the like button, share the video, and subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date with the latest news. Thank you.